Just 3 weeks ago, government officials, corporate leaders, charities and academics gathered together in Bali to sign a document that can potentially change the face of the plastics industry. The new plastics economy global commitment has been signed by more than 250 organisations who between them represent something like 20% of all plastic packaging that's put onto the market. In this DIF session, we'll hear what this commitment represents and what it will ultimately lead to. I'm joined today by two of my colleagues, by Dr. Sarah Wingstrand and by Dr. Mats Linders, who are going to talk us through exactly what's going on with this global commitment and the excitement that it's generated. Mats, first question to you. What is it about this global commitment that makes it so special?
Right, so I think what makes it very special is that this is the first time that a group of organizations have come together and put on paper that they will actually do something. The global commitment is shaped around a common vision that basically describes how to reach a circular economy for plastics, and then also tangible, time-bound commitments to go there. And the New Plastics Economy Initiative, which is this systemic initiative led by the Ellen MacArthur Foundation, we set that up about 2.5 years ago to really change the way the plastic industry works, trying to move it to a circular economy. And from the beginning, we were engaging and working together with a group of engaged and interested organizations, but now we have a very large group of committed organizations. So that is really kind of a game changer, I would say.
The commitment has created a bit of a splash. I believe it was one of the top 10 items in Reuters News, and it's been reported in many different newspapers worldwide.
We also, so what you're showing here is an open letter that was also published in the Financial Times, signed by Ellen MacArthur, of course, Eric Solheim, who is the head of UN Environment, and a number of important industry people and influencers. So it really shows that this is not just it's just not sort of a vague thing that we're going to do. It is very big and serious. It's by far the most encompassing of the many different initiatives that now exist in the plastic space. But this is the one that was kind of, I'm told, I wasn't there unfortunately, but it was sort of the star of the show at the Our Ocean conference in Bali.
And to give people a flavour of the type of organisations that were involved in it, we've got a scroll through of some of these organisations. I think 250 had started off, but
yes. More than that, yes.
It's more than that.
We should say this is the beginning. The door is not closed to join the global commitment. The plastic industry consists of thousands and thousands of different organizations, some very big, some very local, but they all play a role, of course.
People at home will be wondering, well, what's in this commitment? And can you give us a bit of a flavour of that, Sarah?
Yes, so the commitment, basically we're aligning all the signatories behind a common vision, and that is a circular economy for plastic. The circular economy for plastic basically relies on 3 basic principles, and that is to eliminate, innovate, and circulate. So we need to eliminate all the plastic packaging that we don't need, and then we need to innovate such that all the plastic packaging that we do need can be reused, recycled, or composted. And last but not least, we need to make sure that all the plastic packaging that we then end up having in our system is actually circulated. And that is really important because otherwise, we basically need to design out waste so we end up with a situation where plastic never becomes waste.
So those are the 3 principles that are behind the commitment, but there's a sort of pledge. I don't know if pledge is the right word to use, but what's the commitment that these organizations are actually saying, yes, this is what we're aiming for?
Yes, so the organizations are making commitments specific to their, for example, business. So a plastic packaging producer will have set a specific target for 2025 that will include eliminating all problematic and unnecessary plastic packaging, to switch from single-use to reuse models, to make all their plastic packaging 100% reusable, recyclable, or compostable. And then last but not least, we also need to start incorporating recycled content. So they're also setting a target on the percentage of recycled content that there actually be in our plastic packaging.
And it will, of course, vary from business to business or from industry to industry, how ambitious you can make these commitments. For example, there are several uses of plastic packaging where we really don't want to, say, move away from a hygienic single-use packaging. Think about medical equipment or medicine. But what we also realize, and what the community around plastics is increasingly realizing, is that it's not building a circular economy for plastics cannot rely only on recycling. There is really there's very little chance of being able to just recycle our way out of this, which is why investigating as a company, as an industry, where you can actually eliminate stuff that maybe you don't really need, and where you can innovate so that you actually, maybe your only option today is something that is designed for only being used once, and that can't be recycled. But maybe we need to investigate how we can move away from that model to a model where we maybe reuse more packaging, design a new way of delivering, say, groceries that doesn't rely on a packaging that is used only once, for example.
There are some organizations out there and some people out there, I see a question that's come in from Twitter, where people are being skeptical. What's holding organizations to this commitment of recyclable plastic packaging by 2025? What's your response to those who A, think organizations won't do it, and B, there's criticism of the idea that this doesn't go far enough?
So this is actually, it comes back to what's under the hood of the global commitment a little bit. And one of the things that was really important to the New Plastic Economy Initiative was that a global commitment doesn't only need to be quantitative and time-bound, it also needs to be transparent. So it is actually, having signed the global commitment also means that you're committed to report on an annual basis on your progress towards these commitments, which means that you put your targets out there, but you will also follow up on how you're delivering on these targets. On the one hand, that can feel very uncomfortable to a company, but on the other hand, the mechanism is reassuring because you're not alone, right? And if you create a momentum and we reach sort of a tipping point, it would actually be easier to move towards your targets than if you were moving alone. Or maybe at some point it's even easier to move towards your targets than to not move towards your targets. That is, of course, our hope, our ideal vision. But the point is that if you sign in the commitment, you're signing on to also tell the world how you're doing.
And there's so much focus right now on plastics and plastics in our ocean. And I guess the idea, if this stays in the public eye as much as it has done in the last 6 months in particular, there's no hiding place for organizations who say, this is what we want to achieve.
No, exactly. I mean, it's part of the problem that it's very hard to point at one place, one source, one organization, and say that here's where the responsibility lies for X million tons ending up in the ocean every year. It is a systemic problem, meaning that every single stakeholder in the system is part of the problem, but they can also be or have to be part of the solution.
So there's a point about value as well here that we haven't really talked about, the economics behind all this, but I see a question from Rose. She says, I know we are told plastics are bad, but I've heard a lot about plastics having value. Does this global commitment take this into consideration?
Definitely it does. So one of the key points is to innovate. And what lies within this innovation is to design the packaging in a way that it can be reused or recycled or composted in that sense. And what that also means is that you need to keep the material at its highest value at all time. So if a packaging is not recyclable, it doesn't have a value. So we need to design it in a way that it actually has value even after its main function has been, even after it has been used to its main function.
One way of illustrating how much value we are actually losing, or how much value sits in plastic, is to say, this is how much we're losing. And in the first report, New Plastic Economy Initiative, we actually found that just by looking at the value of the material that we lose from the economy, that's a loss of about $80 to $120 billion.
Evilware.
Yeah.
What's going on here?
Yeah, so I think this is one of several great examples of how you can innovate to rethink how we can use the things we don't need or design out the things we don't need. So Evilware is making a wrapping material completely made of seaweed that is sustainably grown in Indonesia in this case. This wrapper is actually edible, and if you put it in hot water, it can dissolve.
Wonderful.
So if you think about all these, a lot of these things that you use, seasoning, sugar, coffee, maybe if you make a cup noodles or a hot soup, a lot of that comes in a packaging material that you throw away afterwards. And here the idea is to just put it in, and it becomes part of your daily nutrition instead.
Niva is a startup that is rethinking how we can sort of deliver products in supermarkets to the consumer. And basically, they have designed a larger container that can dispense products. And the idea is that you can transport this container throughout the value chain. So you don't need the extra packaging and repackaging throughout the value chain. You just have this container, put the pasta or whatever it is inside this container, you bring it all the way to the supermarket, install it in the supermarket, and the consumer can then dispense however much pasta they want from this. And then they are combining it with the Internet of Things. So basically, it automatically tells the shop owner whatever when it's going low, so they need to order a new one.
That's for you, Algramo. What's going on here?
Yeah, so that is a model developed for specifically emerging markets where buying small format packaging actually comes with an extra price because you have to buy them more often, and there's a little bit of markup compared to a big container. So they design out the single-use packaging, and they have a reusable container which the household use over and over again, and a dispenser system to get them the household essentials, both cleaning products as well as basic goods like beans and rice.
This is VTT. What's the big deal
Yeah,
here?
so if you look at this, you see plastics, but it isn't plastics. It is a double layer material made out of treated cellulose. So it looks like plastic, performs more or less like plastics, but in the end of the day, you can compost it along with food waste. And I know there are skeptics who say, why don't we just make this out of recyclable plastics? Well, first of all, we know that these go more and more towards being these multi-layers that don't get recycled. And secondly, most markets today, even though technically possible, they don't have recycling capacity for flexibles at all.
We will continue to recruit for the global commitment. It will grow. And then we will work towards 2025 to really achieve change in practice and at scale. That was what we wanted when we started the New Plastics Economy, and that is definitely where we will work towards.